from a logistical perspective, just so you know, our first panel is going to be local elected officials, town and county, town council members, county commissioners, and also Bailey Schreiber, the head of the Teton Conservation District, talking about these issues from a local perspective. And the concept here is that we have these conversations to sort of prime the pump, to get you thinking about what are the big things that we should be thinking about. And now we're going to try and take that into some more depth. And so to do this, I'm going to ask the first panel of speakers to come up, the town and county electeds.
Thank you, Jonathan, and thank you, Jonathan, for doing all of this.
You're welcome.
I am going to moderate my peers, essentially, and I'm going to do it with as light a touch as possible. I want to remind them that any reference to activities of the Teton County, Wyoming Board of County Commissioners from 2001 to 2012 should be spoke with glowing terms, and what a terrific job they did during that era, and what happened since is just, I don't know what's happened since. And having said that, I will start with my good friend and former, we worked together for many years, Commissioner Barron.
Thank you, Andy. Andy and I worked well together with the County Commission and the Town Council for a number of years. And Andy and I were very fortunate to have participated in co-founding Phil's little organization, Energy Conservation Works, and that legacy continues to move forward. So that's good. Always fun working with you, Andy. I'll give you a quick numbers report. Some of you like numbers, some of you don't, but let's face it, it's your money we're investing. So the Treasurer collected $183 million in 2018. $78 million was retained by Teton County, and $105 million was distributed to various organizations, the State School Foundation, Teton County School Fund and School District, the Town of Jackson, St. John's Hospital or Medical Center, the Conservation District, Weed and Pest, Fair Board, SPED agencies, WIDOT, special districts, etc. We have a very engaged community. The 2018 general fund revenue was $41,585,000. The non-general fund revenue was $36,678,000. Sales tax accounts for 45% of the county general fund and property tax 21%. So 66% of the revenues coming into the county are from property tax and sales tax. Sales tax reported in March 2019 increased 12.62% over March 2018. That would have been accounting for January business, 60-day lag in the reporting. A 12-month rolling average shows the sales tax in Teton County is up 7.58% year to date. These are not insignificant numbers. Today's general fund is roughly $44,483,845. It's not completely approved yet. And that includes about $9 million for capital. Our general reserve fund is $7.1 million, and our capital reserve is $6.8 million. The county has about 14 open full-time positions. If anybody's interested, we're looking for some good people to join the team. Areas of focus, transit. We have been struggling to fill a transit director position. We are endeavoring to move into, we're beginning the master plan process for Stilson. That would be towards a year-round use and transit hub of start and parking. Continued reduction of traffic on 22 and 90. An increase in summer start service for the trips that go between town and Teton Village to reduce more congestion on 22, the town of Jackson, and 390. Increased commuter runs to Alpine, and process and plan the Tribal Trails Connector. Reduce vehicle wildlife collisions. There's a variety of means to do that, lighting 390, wildlife crossings, slower speeds, and we will be endeavoring to begin a regional transportation plan. We are working on some environmental issues. Water quality would be the number one. Land use regulations provide relief from the maximum building size for institutional facilities. You remember there was a little bill that went through the Wyoming legislature this year. Regulations for Munger Mountain Sub-Area 7.1, 7.2, that does not mean the Munger Mountain housing proposal, and some of the areas on Teton Village Road. And we're going to hire one associate long-range planner.
So Mark, can I butt in for a minute?
There you are, Andy.
Because you guys get about 5 minutes and you're still within that. And can you try and tie that into then question number 1?
I'm going to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, health and welfare. Nobody likes, the fact somebody mentioned earlier that the demand for services local governance provides continue to increase. Our job is to try to balance those priorities and make meaningful decisions with your money. Fire EMS, EMTs, 3 EMTs for the ambulance services. That's to meet the increased demand. Continued strong funding for health and human services, continued strong support for the Children's Learning Center, and we will be hiring one environmental health specialist in public health, and primarily for the water quality issues that we have in the south end of the valley. Our region's future, number 1 issue. With nearly 98% protected lands and wildlands habitat, and about 55,000 acres of conservation protection through the Jackson Hole Land Trust. Our part, our Teton County part of the Yellowstone ecosystem, will remain very healthy. We will continue to work at that, but we've got a great start with all of that protected federal land. Middle-class housing shortage will increase, and commuter traffic will increase as our middle-class workforce housing leaves the valley. Accessible housing, I think, will determine our community character and our future. The end.
Thank you, Mark. And you were almost exactly 5 minutes. That's
I was
really
going with that
incredible.
15 from Jonathan.
Okay. And the other thing I forgot, please introduce yourself so that everybody knows who you are. Thanks, Bailey.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bailey Schreiber. I am the chair of the Teton Conservation District Board of Supervisors. I have been on the board since 2015 and was just recently appointed chair, so still getting my feet underneath me as far as chairing a board goes. I was born and raised here, went away for school, and came back in 2015 looking for ways to get involved in the community and give back to what had been my home for a long time and became my home again. I was looking through the paper and saw an opening for the board of the Teton Conservation District and thought to myself, what is the Teton Conservation District? I think that there are probably many in this room who don't have probably a good understanding of what the Conservation District does. And there's sometimes when I have to remind myself what it is we do, because we do a lot. We do collect property taxes. We have 6 staff, including a water resources specialist, wildlife and GIS specialist, and then an ag and rangeland specialist, and another tech and communications person, along with our stellar executive director, Tom Segerstrom, who's in the room. And primarily what we do in these areas is find partners to continue to do conservation work in the district. And the district includes not just Teton County, but also Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Parks. So we have a big footprint. And I'm here today both to talk to you from my perspective as a board member, and also to, I have to say, provide a bit of my own perspective. And I can't speak for the board for everything, but when I was reviewing these questions and trying to come up with some answers, I guess I should also say, in addition to being on the board of the Conservation District Supervisors, I am a natural resource staff attorney for the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. So most of the time I'm taking a statewide perspective on a lot of the issues that we talk about today, especially when it comes to natural resource issues. So I can't help but let that bleed into my perspective and the answer to my questions today. I think the comments that I've heard so far about talking regionally and thinking about our region as more than just Teton County, Idaho, and Wyoming to include at least, the counties that border Teton County is really important. So the first question from your perspective, what is the one most important thing to know about our region's future? I don't think that there is a way that we can stop population growth in this county, and I don't think we are going to stop or probably even limit tourism. I think we could stop advertising, but for the most part, we all carry around a cell phone in our pockets, and we are our own advertisers. I think people visit this place, and it's a beautiful, magical place, and they want to share their experiences, and social media plays a big part in that. So I guess I just don't think that we are gonna, I would I would love to see Teton County to go back to the way it was in the late 1990s. I mean, I think that sounds great, but I think, just as entitled to be here as anybody else is. So I don't think we're closing the door anytime soon. So with that in mind, I would say that it's up to us to absorb, to offset, and to manage the impacts that will come from this kind of growth and visitation. And a lot of what the Conservation District does is try to manage that growth. From water quality, like Mark mentioned, making sure that our wastewater treatment facility can handle that kind of waste, making sure that the trash that results from that kind of growth and visitation is handled in a responsible way. My time's up, before Andy cuts me short, well, not short, but cuts me off, I wanted to get to the second question, because I think that's really what I think is the most important. It asks a question: how do we make our future better? And I think there's some really important words in that question. Who are we talking about when we say our? And what do we mean by better? I think somebody from Teton County is going to have a very different idea of what a better future is than somebody from Campbell County, Wyoming, home of the largest coal mine in the world. So I think it's really important for us to be humble, to exercise humility, to remember that we don't all share common values and common interests, that there is a lot of common ground among us here in Teton County and in Campbell County, and everywhere else in between. And that it's really important to be good neighbors and good listeners and good stewards, and be humble and know we don't have all the answers. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Bailey. Arn?
Thank you, Representative. Appreciate this. And thank you, Jonathan. He disappeared. He's back there. Thank you. And thank you for letting me be here. Arn Jorgensen, recently elected to the Jackson Town Council. This is part of the job that I'm not sure I really anticipated, so I will take this and run with it and see what happens. So Jonathan asked us a question about looking to our future. And in my mind, it is fully understanding the challenges that we face and where those are coming from. That's been talked about a lot already this morning, and that would be we are under intense, we are known, we have intense attention faced on us, both nationally and internationally. That's real. Comes with that are a lot of impacts. Comes with that is an almost mind-blowing level of wealth that will outcompete us on a local level on almost anything. Now, that's a challenge, and it's also an opportunity. So I think when I look to the future, those are the realities we have. I suspect everybody in this room is here because of a deep passion to this place. So how do we manage that and preserve that? And I think that's what all of us up here are doing. Taking the lead at this table earlier from an optimistic standpoint, I don't think any of us would be sitting up here if we weren't optimistic by nature. We have incredible challenges that we're facing. When we went through the recent strategic planning discussions at the town council, we identified very quickly the town is doing a lot of things. Jonathan talks about it as the potholes, filling the potholes. This time of year, they may not feel quite as filled as we'd like them, but there's an intense amount of pressure. We do that really, really well. When you turn on the water or flush the toilet, something happens and it's the right thing. So there's a base level of services that we do really well. So what should we be doing above and beyond that? and thinking long-term strategically, taking a lot of the discussions we're having in this room and applying that at a local government level. That's what we're doing. One of the things that we're doing for the first time, and we're learning as we go through this process, I so much appreciated Commissioner Barron's comments and on the budget line items, because you know those far better than I do on the county side. But on the town side, what we're starting to do is try to frame the budget not as departments, but as programs. So when you think about what does it take when someone goes and enforces parking tickets downtown, that's legal department, there's some public works in there, there's police, obviously. So going through and taking all those line items and trying to come up with, I believe it's 38 programs and then another 8 core services programs. 6. I knew the detail guy was behind me somewhere. And so we can, for the first time, begin to look at our budget as a snapshot and say, what does it take for us to do alternative modes of transportation, for example? So in the budget we're reviewing right now, the town of Jackson budget is about 21% of that budget is focused on transportation goals. That's a good thing. We can always do better, but I think it's important, as we were talking about, several people talked about earlier, we are doing a lot, and we can always think outside the box and improve that. But that 21%, that's a huge number. 2 minutes. I still have 2 minutes. Sorry, Nancy. And then I was getting 2 different messages. On housing, for example, we are poised to put about $1.5 million into either employee housing on the town side or community housing. That discussion is ongoing. The county is also doing a significant amount in that realm. We have, and the numbers, I've heard different numbers recently, but through, I believe, strictly restricted housing is about 1,000 units, maybe a little bit more than that. That's a good thing. We need to embrace that. Now, looking into the future, the town has identified that we need to be really clearly looking for, working within the constraints that we currently have, how do we increase revenue sources so we can be more strategic about funding into the future. And that's a process that we're looking very, very closely on. We've now added an item on our agenda that talks about strategic planning. We're still trying to figure out how to manage that, but trying to force ourselves to have that discussion on an ongoing basis. So for me, that is a discussion, and it's been talked about by most of you in this room, whether it's additional sales tax, whether it's additional property tax, whether it's lodging tax, whether it's additional philanthropic activity within this community. Those are all things we need to be focused on if we're really serious about addressing and managing the impacts that we all have. I really appreciate Bailey's comment. There are very few of us in here, there are probably some actually, frankly, but there are a few of us in here that'll say, shut the gate before I got here. And we need to take a really close look on how we all live our lives and how we manage our lives and our interactions with each other. So thank you very much.
Hiram Johnson, Mayor, Driggs, Idaho. And lest I disappoint Jonathan and others, what is my tagline here? Who knows it? Greatest economic opportunity in the Northern Rockies, Driggs, Idaho. I still stand by that, but I'm a little bit more cautious with it for reasons that we're seeing here in Jackson. I want to throw a few numbers at you, and then we're going to do a jumping jack exercise. So, first number, 4.1 million. 4.1 million is the number of visitors to Yellowstone Park last year. For the last 5 years, 4 years, 5 years, we've seen numbers over 4 million in Yellowstone. 3.5 million, I believe, is the latest number in Grand Teton Park for last year or the year before, thereabouts. So let's put those numbers in perspective. The combined populations of the 3 states which border Yellowstone National Park, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. Anyone know? Combined populations of those 3 states, 3.6 million people. Folks, we have more people coming to visit this region than the entire 3 states' populations. That's a lot of visitors. That's people from all over the world. Those visitors then translate. Sorry, I'm making it really hard for our camera guy here as I move around, but that's just me, sorry. Those people come in, they see what a fantastic place this is, and some of them decide to relocate here, whether it be through retirement, whether it be that they were displaced by a hurricane or a tornado or other major storms or disasters. A lot of folks are coming here, and a lot of that is driven primarily by the engine of tourism. So in Driggs, we've been focusing heavily, in Driggs and Teton County, Idaho, we've been focusing heavily in our economic development efforts on growing business, growing more diversity. And fortunately, I can't tell you the exact numbers, but fortunately, we have a more diverse economy over there than you do here in Jackson. The numbers aren't as big by any means, but we believe we're succeeding in diversifying. Statewide, it's the same story. Growth takes many forms. As I alluded, it starts with the tourism. 2 minutes? That's not scissors? Okay. All right. Tourism is a form of growth. Climate change driven. Relocation is a form of growth. Population growth is a form of growth. We have all these things impacting us. We cannot shut the gate. It is not legal in this country for us to just shut off development. We cannot do that. We have to manage that development, and that needs to be a collaborative effort. So I'm going to switch gears here for a moment. Everyone in this room that is an elected official, will you please stand up? Elected officials. How many of you are from Wyoming? Raise your hands. No, as an elected official. And how many of you are elected officials in the state of Idaho? Okay, so remain standing. Of those of you who are standing, how many of you in the last 6 months have had an interaction with one of your elected official counterparts in your neighboring state? Sit down, those of you that just raised your hands. Now, I'm going to shame the rest of you. Go ahead and sit down. I'm going to shame the rest of you. If we are going to solve these problems, these are regional problems. If we are going to solve these problems, the problems associated with growth, we have to be thinking bigger picture. We have to be getting outside of our own communities, our own little world, and working together in a regional capacity. We have to be building partnerships, coalitions, financial planning, across the board. We have to be working together on a much greater scale.
And on that note.
And I guess on that note, I'll just hand off the microphone. Thank you.
Jeff Potter, Mayor of the City of Victor over in Idaho. Thanks again, Jonathan, for hosting this again. It's always a very interesting discussion that I take a couple pieces back with me to the other side and try to continue to make our community a better place to live in. In addressing the question specifically, I guess I'll just give a little prelude on Victor. Victor is growing right now. Victor is under intense development pressure, primarily driven by the need for housing related to the shortage here in Teton County, Wyoming. We are also seeing pressure from those who choose to relocate to the region for primarily lifestyle choices and have the wherewithal to make that happen. We're starting to see incremental commercial development. Victor has effectively not seen commercial development since before the recession until just in the last year and a half, and it's still very, very nominal. Just to give a little perspective for everyone here, the population of Victor we estimate is a little bit over 2,000 now with some of the growth we've seen, and our annual operating budget is a little bit over $3 million, of which about 2/3 is dedicated to utility enterprise funds, water, sewer, roads, et cetera. So Just a little perspective on the resources that we are dealing with and struggling to address what are real problems, big city problems, as Jonathan pointed out, affecting our small community of 2,000 people. The biggest problem that I see facing us and the biggest challenge is that the growth pressure is going to continue. This is such a desirable place to live. Millions of people visit annually. There are going to be a fractional percentage of those visitors every year who say, hey, this is a great place. I want to go live there. Why shouldn't I be able to live there too? So those pressures for growth, for population growth, for expansion of developed footprint are going to continue to be there, and we need to be proactive in addressing them. And we need to start to think outside of the box. Simple regulation is not going to have the impact that we all desire. We need what I've heard others refer to in here today as a paradigm shift. A big part of that paradigm shift is getting outside of our own respective jurisdictional boxes and starting to reach across state lines, across county lines, to the broader region, to come up with cohesive plans to address major issues. Transit is a really big one. I'm a commuter. I work in town 5 days a week, sometimes more in the winter, and so I live it. I'm driving that pass every day. I'm in that traffic on weekday afternoons in the middle of summer trying to get home to get my kids from activities and stuff, you know, sitting in stop and go from the stoplight all the way to the village road. So one thing that I'm just going to throw out there that I think can help start to trigger, you know, a little bit of a shift in the way of thinking, and I'm going to steal this from Mayor Muldoon, who kind of threw it out there when I was just having a meal with him when we were at a planning conference up in Alberta in the fall. And it's the notion that, you know, there's so much focus on expanding transit options, expanding bus service, expanding rideshare programs, expanding. What if we focus more on eliminating the need for people to commute? If they don't have to physically be present at a job, at a professional position, which a large portion of the high-paying jobs in this community are very professional in nature and are effectively done at a desk and a computer and a phone, let's start thinking about ways that we as a regional community can mitigate the need to commute. In Victor, there are opportunities abound for satellite offices, for telecommuting opportunities, for growing companies in Jackson Hole that are starting to run out of space. Look to other options outside of this community that are efficient from a cost standpoint, that open up the availability of housing for employees that you're recruiting from out of state. And that are still geographically in proximity so that when you do need to get together, you still can. It's not a big deal.
So we'll get back to this.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. I'm Cindy Regal, Teton County Commissioner, and in Idaho, that is. I wanted to let everyone know that we have almost hired a consultant to help us write a new land use code for Teton County, Idaho. It's been since 1979. So it's been a long time coming, and I know the mayors of Victor and Driggs are happy to hear that we will be implementing our comprehensive plan, which really complements the comprehensive plans from the cities so that we are pushing growth towards the cities and not continuing to sprawl throughout our county. So I just wanted to report that, but what's been on my mind lately is what I wanted to talk to you all about today, and that is diversity, inclusion, and equity in our communities. And starting with the question, who gets to make decisions about growth and spending in our communities? Well, it's us. It's the elected leaders and appointed leaders in our communities. Who gets to create community and influence decisions? Well, those are the people in this room. These people are generally associated with nonprofits, advocacy groups, and membership organizations, or retirees, independently wealthy, or political junkies. So essentially, we're a very limited group, even though we feel very diverse. We're pretty limited to being the privileged few who get to influence what's happening. So in our community, we have a controversy around the Redskins, our high school mascot. And I've been reading quite a bit about the controversy here in Jackson around the Shift Festival. And I think it's really important to kind of bring those controversies into this room and look at how we can be more inclusive in our communities. So the most important thing we need to know is who's being left out and how can we better engage everyone in planning for the future. So I have a story to tell. This might relax me a little bit. Because this is not a topic I'm an expert on by any means, so it's harder for me to talk about. But we have a project in Teton County, the Bates Boat Ramp, that we basically created a new access point in an 80-acre park for people to get onto the Teton River with their boats. And I was kind of adamant in the beginning that we actually do something to allow people who don't have boats to enjoy the river. And I have been kind of pushing for this idea of a picnic area or a place where families can come and just hang out. And in my mind, the family was Latino. And I didn't really share that with anyone, and I didn't share that or ask for input from the Latino community. And what ended up happening was my idea for kind of a fun picnic gathering place got pushed out, and the picnic tables weren't funded. And I also found out that the Spanish language signs that had the fishing regulations on them were taken away and weren't put back because they weren't supported by our local Fish and Game. So my solution, since I'm probably down to almost 0 minutes now, is how can we do better? How can we better serve our entire community? How can we engage everyone in planning for our future? And let's start with diversity and inclusion training for community leaders, make that mandatory. Let's work on better engaging everyone in our community in a meaningful way, and let's ask for the youth. Let's ask the youth what we need to do to ensure that they want to live here and raise families here 30 years from now. And there's
I think that was a good stopping point.
Do you think?
Yeah,
Okay.
but now I get to ask questions.
Okay,
You'll be able to
awesome.
respond to
Okay,
those.
thanks.
Okay,
I wasn't ready to stop,
I
but
know. Thank you. And thank you all for putting up with me so far. So there were a couple common threads, and so the first one I want to ask you guys about is how do we encourage regional coordination and action? Because I can speak from experience, and even though we only have one municipality in Teton County, Wyoming, the town and the county can't even always manage to work well together. How can we get this diverse group of entities to work better together to solve the problems that we're talking about? Growth, transportation, housing. And Hiram wants to go first.
Well, I think beer helps. Oh, yeah. You know, if we look at the history, there was the Teton Area Advisory Forum, TAF, which was created probably during your tenure. That actually structurally still exists, but I don't think that the town of Jackson or the county, Teton County, Wyoming, have participated in that in about 3 or 4 years. It's really kind of become a Teton Valley thing, and even at that, it's struggling. So over on our side of the hill, we hold a council of governments, which is basically the 3 of us plus the mayor of Teutonia getting together and sorting through some of our regional issues over there. I would suggest, though, that we actually need a bigger umbrella. We need more than just these 2 counties. We need to be wrapping the entire greater Yellowstone ecosystem into this. Perhaps we need West Yellowstone to be part of the conversation. We need to address these things on a much larger scale. And the first step is just getting to know each other. And that's why I asked the electeds to stand up, and I shamed a few of you. I think we need to be talking more often.
Okay, we're gonna stop you there. Anybody else?
Thank you very much for that question. I think it's a great question. The comment I was making about thinking strategically, thinking about the work we're each doing in each of our organizations, let that pothole activity happen. It's happening really well. To free up time to have these kind of discussions would be really important. Rethinking and restructuring what we're doing. And can I pivot really quickly to something Cindy said? I really appreciate your diversity question. And I want to do a shout out to CWC. They had a diversity training last Friday, if I remember right, bringing people from our region, from the Wind River Reservation and Riverton. So I think we are beginning to have those discussions. We need to do much more of that. So thank you for raising that.
As far as perspective from the Conservation District goes, a lot of the work we do is project-oriented, and we find projects to collaborate on with other conservation districts in other counties and even in Teton Valley, Idaho. We help fund Friends of the Teton River, and we actually help Curtis Hatterley with Hatterley Farms develop his composting efforts, where he comes up here and takes compost down to Lincoln County and composts it down there. So for us, it's project oriented, but then it also gives us an opportunity to meet folks and get to know them and build those relationships.
I think it does begin with our two counties. And in a previous life, I did come and visit you guys the last 5 months in this new service. Haven't been there yet. But I am going to go see Jeff's staff tomorrow on a different issue. But, it's about getting together and identifying our common issues, obstacles to successful communities, and then working together. And I think for Teton County and probably for the town of Jackson, I won't speak for them, it starts with probably around that regional transportation plan, because traffic congestion is our #1 issue, and it's connected to the housing shortage.
I guess I would say we have a lot of smart people in this community and in this room in particular. However, nobody has a monopoly on all the good ideas, and I think the first step is to look outside of our community to other areas that have had successful endeavors in dealing with regional issues. And there's a few very specific examples. The one I'm going to call out right now is the Tahoe Regional Planning Authority, which was established by an act of Congress and ratification and signatures of the two governors of the states of California and Nevada in the 1960s, with the sole stated purpose being to preserve the clarity of the water of Lake Tahoe. It wasn't to provide housing, it wasn't to facilitate transit, it wasn't to impose government regulation on private property. It was to preserve the water clarity of Lake Tahoe. And anything else that was associated with adversely impacting the clarity of the water of Lake Tahoe became second to preserving that clarity. So I view our greater regional ecosystem as Lake Tahoe and the clarity is being affected right now. And until we take bigger, broader regional steps to deal with the preservation of the amenities that we have here, the focus is on the wrong syllable, if you will.
No, I don't. Let's go to the next one. Those are all
Okay.
good great answers.
So, having heard all that and the acknowledgement that regional coordination is important, I like the Tahoe analogy, but what is the one thing, both what is the overlying principle, like Tahoe being keeping the lake clear, and what's the effort we make to do that? What's the one thing that you guys think we can work on regionally that's the most important? Anybody? If not, we'll move on.
I think we did sort of, I think it's been identified by Mark, like technically speaking, where we want to work on and have committed to working on transportation, regional transportation.
And I'm seeing a lot of head nods.
But go, I mean, there's more.
I mean, from a practical, hands-on, absolutely no doubt about it. A comment that you were making earlier about reaching beyond these two counties. Many in this room are familiar with the Yellowstone Business Partnership, an organization that tried to do that around Yellowstone, and an amazing group of people and an amazing amount of interest. And their common thread was Yellowstone as opposed to Lake Tahoe. But I think from my perception, it is a very diverse area. The 25 counties I think they were working within, that the common thread was a significant part of your economy is tied to Yellowstone, was how that came together. But I think there is that lens that's important not to keep in mind, or important not to lose. So I just want to throw that out at a very high level.
I think one other thing that ties us together as a region potentially is large ungulates, migration corridors, and wildlife vehicle collisions and trying to prevent those. I think you think about transportation corridors, you have these migration corridors that really do tie the region together ecologically. And big game is important to Fremont County, it's important to Lincoln County, it's important to Sweetwater County, it's important to both Teton counties. So I think that may be another issue that could be addressed regionally.
I would just add another one that you reminded me of, is food and farming. So there is a Teton Food and Farming Coalition, and there are individuals from both sides that meet monthly over in basically our extension office. So we don't meet over here. We probably should. I think it's a good way to bring community together around food and agriculture, and that's a really important thing to me in Teton County, Idaho, is protecting our agricultural lands and heritage.
So may I play the devil's advocate for a moment here? It's easy for us. We all kind of live in an ivory tower. I think Jonathan has alluded to this in the past. We don't necessarily understand the reality of even many of the people in our community, those who are forced to essentially commute the pass and work a long job cleaning hotels or whatnot. I think that the way that, or the reason that the Tahoe Coalition worked is because it identified a single gem that people from many different diverse backgrounds were able to get behind. If you look at the politics of trying to do something like that today, it probably wouldn't happen in Tahoe today, and it would probably be next to impossible to enact a similar thing here in the Yellowstone ecosystem today, just simply because of the level of discourse that we face. So the question is, and I pose this question to the group and to the public at large, how do we rise above those differences, those political differences? If you ask two people in Teton County, Idaho, how to preserve or what it means to preserve the character of the place, you'll get three answers. So we all have our different ideas of what matters and what is important. How do we bridge that?
I would just add, transit is where the rubber effectively meets the road, and you got to start somewhere, and that's as good of a focal point for the various communities to start to focus on as a starting point to build those relationships and start to have those broader discussions.
And Hiram, I love your question. What's the gem? What's our lake? We need to identify that. In our minds, probably everyone in this room would say it's the ecosystem, but what does that really mean?
Yes. So I'm going to do one quicker question, and then I'll open it up to questions from the audience. But the whole time I've been talking, I'm looking past you all to see people here from the Park Service. So we all know Teton County, Wyoming is 97% federal land. I don't know the percentage on your side, but I'm sure it's not that much, but it's still significant. And this is almost a yes/no question. Are you guys reaching out to your federal counterparts to work on on solutions to the problems we're talking about? And if not, why not?
I have a great relationship with our district ranger, but other than that, we aren't, I would say. We aren't. But these guys might have a different answer.
I don't know the exact number, but Teton County, Idaho is actually almost a polar opposite of Teton County, Wyoming, where something like 90 to 95%, maybe even a little higher, of the land in Teton County, Idaho is privately owned. So the federal lands border the periphery of the county with the mountain territories, but the majority of the land is privately held. So it's a little different dynamic. We work with the Bridger Teton on trail and pathway projects in and around the southern end of the valley, and are definitely having some of those conversations, but it's a little bit of a different dynamic.
I'm new in this seat, so I may not have this answer completely correct, other than, yes, we are meeting, and yes, we do talk. I get together every month, every other month. Is it every month? Yeah, I just missed a couple of them. We do get together. Now, we have vastly different missions in terms of, it goes back to those potholes. We each have the things we need to get done. And I remember, and I will leave it nameless because they may get in trouble, the meeting that we had during the government shutdown was low attendance, or the lunch or the breakfast we had, government shutdown. But, I mean, we each have our own little worlds we're playing in, but I think there is a reasonable and very respectful dialogue between the town of Jackson and I think Teton County as well with the elected officials. I would love to find ways to engage in a greater level with Yellowstone, and I know that we have a representative here from Yellowstone, because I do feel a little disconnected from Yellowstone. And is it more than half of Yellowstone or nearly half of Yellowstone? I think it's nearly half of Yellowstone is Teton County. It's one of my pet peeves. Every time I see the state of Wyoming map, a lot of them from the state of Wyoming shows Yellowstone as not part of Park in Teton County. It drives me nuts.
Given a common mission and overlap, Teton Conservation District does a lot of partnering with the Forest Service and Grand Teton National Park. Not quite so much with Yellowstone, but definitely the Forest Service and Grand Teton. We've done a lot of work helping the park restore the Kelly hayfields up north. We partner with the Forest Service regularly on range management. And yep, we partner quite a bit with the federal agencies. Don't leave.
And now, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to embarrass you. Before they leave, I will say, because Arn mentioned the government shutdown, the Wyoming legislature, in our infinite wisdom, had a bill related to that, and I believe the language was we would seize Yellowstone Park in the event of a future government shutdown. So it's all going to be good.
You'd have a place to float the state's battleship, too. That'd be great. Yeah, as Andy had said, we have an interagency breakfast with the Forest Service, Game and Fish, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Grand Teton National Park, town and county. And at the very minimum, we're familiarizing all of our different entities with our common problems and unique issues. The town and the county had worked with the Bridger Teton National Forest in a number of ways over the years. One was trying to help them get into a new headquarters. They've been successful despite our efforts. We worked with them. We helped fund a study of their Nelson Drive housing so that they could increase the density there. There's always opportunities to work with Grand Teton National Park, and they invite us up for a workshop every year in the spring. So I think the communication is good. The ability to actually pull out projects and work on it's a little more difficult.
Great, thank you all. So now we're going to go to you guys for questions, and Mr. Unfried already has his hand up. There will be one qualification on questions. I ask that they be actual questions and not comments. Thank you very much. So Steve, you can start.
Thank you. This is real quick. It's a public health and safety issue, which I think you guys could all get together on. It's regional. It's transportation. Let's put some snow sheds up on the pass. Why can't we do that, is my question.
Actually, I might be able to answer this better than they. I've been working with WYDOT on that. Actually, I was in Cheyenne last week, and I had a meeting with the new director of WYDOT. I brought that subject up. And mostly what my request was, at least to have a conversation here about snow sheds, because YDOT's very resistant. But he was receptive to that, and we'll see what happens. If anybody wants to add on to that.
We're all behind that.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody else have a question?
I'm interested in what's been said so far about water quality. I think that that is a very hidden issue here, and I'm glad to see that there are some things happening. But on a broader level, I'm wondering, are there impacts regionally that you all need to be thinking about with water quality issues, or is this just a very limited, contained Teton County, Wyoming issue?
I'll take first shot at that. Thank you, Marcia. I think water quality is an issue of the 21st century. We only have so much water. We have a growing planet, and with a growing planet locally, we have septic systems. They're causing some problems on the south end of the valley, maybe in other parts of our valley, and the ability to address that is important. Obviously, our streams, our river, our lakes are all important. There are conservation issues around water quality, as well as the purity of the water in our aquifers. So yeah, I think this is going to be, it's going to become an even more precious resource as life goes on.
Water quality is something that the Conservation District takes a really close look at and spends a lot of time on. We have spent a lot of time focusing, at least more recently, on water quality on the West Bank and countywide, and high levels of nitrates that are in our streams, and what the cause of that those levels are. Looking at fertilizer runoff, looking at septic systems. We have a program now where we will help individuals cover the cost of pumping their septic systems to try to reduce that effluent flowing into our water bodies. And we've also mapped all known septic systems in the county and tried to make that information as public as possible so we have an understanding of where our waste is going and how it may affect rivers and streams in the area. So definitely something, and also, as Mark mentioned, looking at water quality down south and helping to facilitate the conversation about how to address water quality issues down in the Hoback area. So an issue we take very seriously. On the regional question, I'm not so sure. I'd have to defer to somebody else on that.
Just quickly, the town of Jackson, because we have the largest sewer treatment plant in the county, is starting a study that will identify the current capacity and potential increases, kind of in parallel with some of the work that's being done by others as far as what tools do we have to be able to address that. I will throw out a caution when we talk about these tools. They also bring back, and this is a circular discussion, that growth discussion. So when we have these discussions, we need to do better about treating our water, treating our waste stream. Absolutely. That's going to take an infrastructure. Does that then say, well, now we can afford more housing and more people? We're going to get back into this circular discussion. So I want to make sure that we're having that up front and we don't end up with it at the back end. But the town is in the process. I think it's about a 2-year process about really fine-tuning what is the capacity at that plant and what the potential expansion is. And then I think the other piece, and this is something that I was observing during the Yellowstone Business Partnership discussions, is Teton Valley has a similar aquifer that we do. My understanding of it. There's some lessons learned, and you guys could maybe get ahead of this issue than where we are, because I think we have some issues that are similar in these two basins.
So the Driggs operates the wastewater treatment plant that services Victor and many communities in between the two cities. It is the largest wastewater treatment facility in the valley. And we also are embarking on a study to quantify capacity, to identify at what point we need to expand that and so forth. My biggest concern when it comes to water quality is the many septic systems out in the county. There are a lot. In the cities, they have to connect to our system, but in the county, that requirement isn't necessarily there. To Arden's point, I think it is a circular discussion. We need to make sure that we are considering all of the impacts or all of the results from expanding facilities, inviting new development. How do we handle that growth? Can our system handle it? Can our ecosystem handle what's flowing out?
We do have a very similar aquifer system, and no good deed goes unpunished. Back in, I guess, 20, 30 years ago, the farmers at the southern end of Teton Valley got together. Traditionally, all the agriculture in the southern end of the valley was canal-fed flood irrigation, utilizing canals and ditches. And at some point, they decided, hey, you know what? We're gonna get together and we're gonna all put money into a pressurized irrigation system that saves water. It reduces the waste of water, the loss of water to evaporation and into the ground and so on and so forth, because that's a good thing, right? So here we are 20, 25 years later, and what's transpired? The aquifer in the southern end of Teton Valley has dropped over that period of time. And with the Friends of the Teton River, I would imagine with the help of the Teton Conservation District, have been able to successfully come together with the farming community, traditionally adversaries, viewed as adversarial in the way that they both manage or advocate to manage water resources, have come together and actually reactivated all of those irrigation canals in the springtime when there's plentiful water, because those canals lose about 50% of the water that go into them, into the ground. And to the point now where 4 or 5 years in, the aquifer level in the valley is trending upward because more water is getting put back into the ground in the springtime, which benefits the farmers because now the aquifer produces water into the wetlands of the Teton River throughout the summer. So there's no, one of the Trail Creek, one of the key tributaries through the Victor area, never dries up now. There's still water flowing out of the aquifer into the river, which means that the state doesn't have to do what's called a feudal call, where they shut down all the irrigation systems to see if water being diverted at the head gate at Trail Creek will reach the Teton River, because there's still flows going into the Teton River from the aquifer. So the agricultural community still has water throughout the summer into the fall. And that's just an example of a win-win where traditionally adversarial groups have come together to find real solutions that are making a difference.
I love that story. I would just add that the fish, the fish benefit too by having stream flows later in the fall and colder water as well. So it's a great collaborative project we can all be proud of. Thanks.
Other questions? Yeah.
I've been watching the highway construction from Jackson down to Hoback over the last few years. And they're just about done with phase 1 down to South Park. And I've talked to Bob Hammond about what the philosophy is about road construction in this area. And Bob's a great guy and is very helpful, but I haven't got a clear sense of how thought through what you might call the philosophy of road construction is in the Teton counties, or for that matter down in Lincoln. And so I invite your comments about, or your thoughts about how we should approach the question of dealing with road construction.
So we could either build a wall or we could fire all the engineers. Engineers think in terms of how much can I get through, whether it's a pipe or a highway. We're facing the same thing on our side of the hill. We have the very educated and helpful engineers who say, we're running at 95% of capacity on this highway, we need to make it wider. And we look at that and we say, no, we need to find other ways of more compact transportation, buses, alternative pathways, things like that. So it's a constant battle between us and the engineers to try to find that happy medium. We'll keep fighting it.
Yeah, I would just add the YDOT is listening. There are systems in place on this side between the town and the county, and an ongoing dialogue about that. It is not done. It's not unlike the snow shed discussion or the engineer standard-based discussion. But they are listening. They're absolutely key partners to how we move people around this community. The town of Jackson, and I'll let Mark speak for the county, but I think this community is very engaged in that. And I think we're getting better, frankly, at doing that in a respectful way and understanding where we're each coming from, because I'm not sure we do that all the time.
It's a great question. Road construction is involving many more things than just the road service. Obviously, south of town, we have more lanes. I think that's been working. In addition, we have a detached pathway. In addition, we have underpasses for wildlife movement. These are the key elements. In addition, I think you're going to see the potential for bus lanes, maybe more towards Teton Village on 22 and 390, but you don't get a bus lane unless you add additional lanes. So we're going to have more lanes. We're going to have continued construction. We're going to continue our investments, ongoing investments in detached pathways. A lot of people are commuting by bicycle. On a year-round basis, we still have people commuting by bicycle. It's a very inexpensive way to get people out of their own cars.
Great, we have time
And as a
for,
last resort, if you're worried about that congestion, just check out the guy in the rearview mirror.
so we have time for one more. Nikki?
Thanks all for your insight. I was wondering what actions you guys are taking to make sure we're including and protecting our Latinx population, and on top of that, or other minority populations in addition. And are you taking any actions to proactively reach out to populations who might not be able to attend town council meetings, might not be able to voice their concerns because they are working too much or don't have the time or don't know about those resources because of language barriers or can't attend things like this? What are you guys doing to find those vulnerable populations and hear their concerns?
Thank you very much, Nikki, for that question. We need to do a much better job, and some of it was the question that Cindy raised earlier, the discussion we were having last week. It is notable when you look at around this room. Now, both from whether it's from a race identity, gender looks pretty good. Probably we're a little bit on the upper edge of the ages in here. Thank you for pushing us down. But I think it's a really important recognition that we need to do better outreach. The town, with the budget we're reviewing right now, we are looking at increasing community outreach opportunities. And there's also, I think, an increasing, and in the discussions that we're having about funding social service requests, we are tentatively at this point supporting the requested increase from 122, which is kind of the nonprofit realm relative to the Latino community that we have in this county. But there's also a recognition that those nonprofits that are working with those groups are not representative of 100% of that community either. So I think we need to be a little careful about too quickly jumping on, oh good, here's someone doing this great work, now we're done. Because we're not done. And I've been very pleased, and I want to give a shout out to the Chamber actually. The Chamber's done a good job of getting a more diverse board in place, and it's noticeable when you go to some of their meetings. And you tend to look at that and you say, these are the rising leaders in our community, and I look forward to when they're sitting up here. Though it's small steps, asking people over and over and over again if they're interested, encouraging them, enabling them when they are, and listening to them when they do speak up. I'm sure someone else wants to say something.
There are many investments that can be made on behalf of our Latino population. The number one investment would be rental housing. It's the number one complaint I have from the people I work with. Employers are doing what they can in terms of providing rental housing. The other thing, as a community, as wages continue to rise at a very quick pace in our community, the things that don't get spoken to are the employee benefits, the health benefits that go with that, paid time off, seasonal full-time jobs becoming full-time year-round jobs with complete benefits. And as these individuals, now families, now children and families continue to grow, we need to continue to support the investments that are being made in our school system. Teton Literacy Program, 122, there are a variety of investment opportunities in our community. And I think anytime we sit down at the table with our Latino population, we get better information, and there's just more to do.
Thanks for your question, Nikki. I think that's something that the Conservation District could do a lot better at. I think we do a lot of education and outreach, especially in schools, but I think education and outreach and involving the Latino community is something that the Conservation District could definitely work on. I think as far as, I think we're talking about water quality issues and in drinking water. I think that when you're talking about populations that are impacted by those kinds of problems, you're most likely talking about low income, maybe minority populations. And I think that that's something that we, as far as environmental justice, need to really focus on. So thanks for your question.
Okay, so I don't think we're doing nearly as enough, but I need help to know what to do. I think it's really important that we co-create opportunities for voices that aren't heard in our communities to get involved. They need to tell us, what is the best way to engage them. And so I don't really have an answer to this question, except we need help, and we need to ask for help. And I'm ready to do that.
Ditto that. That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you for asking the question. Population of Driggs, I believe 20% is Latin. Of all our boards and commissions, not a single member is Latino. We need help connecting with those folks. They have their events, they have their organizations. I think since 2016, a lot of them have kind of hunkered down, a lot of fear, justifiably so. How can we help? That's the question I would put out there.
And I just want to put in a plug for our school district, who is doing something, and Chris Isaacson is here. And I think it's working really well. I'd love for her to talk about it when she gets a chance to be up here.
I'm sorry, but I just can't not let this pass. A census is coming up, and we all need to do everything we possibly can from a funding standpoint, volunteer standpoint, to do everything we can to reach out to that community. The threads that come out of that go into all of these. So I mean, the money in that case. But it's also I mean, it goes back to letting this population, all of our community, feel heard and protected. And the census is just going to be a real trigger point. And I will tell you, it is not getting funded from the fund that you can earn doing a census counter is not anywhere near the market in this region. So they're going to be understaffed. It's guaranteed. So I want to emphasize that.
Okay, now I'm going to jump in as an old white guy and say I would like everybody here to thank the panel. I think they did a great job.